All right, so talking about our ultra-modernists, right? So people that are taking ideas that have been around for a while, modern ideas that have been around, and the ultra is they take it to an extreme. And so Varese and Cowell's and Crawford's piece, they all sound very different, but we're grouping them together because it's coming from a similar mindset, right? So Varese, who was influenced by that new aesthetic of music from the Italians, those Italian futurists that wanted to incorporate noise, right, into the compositional process, and was active in the 1920s with two different composer groups. Okay. These should be notes that you have already, and incorporating different lots of percussion instruments like the lion roar that we talked about, and that shows up in his 1922-23 piece, Hyperprism. Right, and so one of the comments we made about that was him thinking differently about the process and thinking maybe a bit more spatially than harmonically or rhythmically or melodically, right? We do hear some melodic things, but he's not lacing them together or connecting them in ways that composers have, right? So he's thinking about sort of this more experience of the ensemble that involves sort of hearing these noises around you, right? And putting them in that artistic frame of the beginning of a piece, middle, and end. Yeah.
So on my notes I wrote down Italian futurist.
Yep. That means the Italian futurist, right? So that's a group of composers that wanted to incorporate noise into the compositional process. Yeah.
So like who was it just him that was like big in that, like well known?
For the Italian futurists? No, we continue to have, other composers that later on that are involved in this. And Cage is also, influenced by this idea of incorporating noise, right? This is just one particular person that's influenced by that. All right, second one, Henry Cowell, taking a Western instrument and approaching it from a different perspective. So we see that in his piece, The Banshee. The Banshee doesn't have tone clusters in it, but that's one of the things that he did. That's what we're seeing him do here. And the two places where you get to know more about his compositional process is in New Musical Resources. So that's like his description of what his theoretical compositional ideas are. And then the New Music Journals where he writes about other composers that do similar kinds of things. Right? And then the Banshee, right? This is something that he also had to change his notational practice for that. So the performer has to read that chart at the beginning. And when you see an A with a circle, that means that you play the inside of the string with one part of your finger. B means doing it another way, maybe with your fingernail, right? So you have to memorize those new cues on how to approach the instrument, okay? Before you can play it.
Did he teach music to himself?
Yes, he did. He's a self-taught musician.
So he's the one who lived in a house full of people.
In a commune.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did.
The Banshee.
So, everybody remember that one? Yeah, cool. All right, then Ruth Crawford, a composer who was not approaching instruments from a different, angle. We have a piece for her. This is a string quartet, right? And that's pretty traditional, right? And they play the instruments pretty traditional. She's not necessarily asking for extended techniques, right? It's a compositional process that she goes through that puts her into that ultra-modernist group, okay? She's the first woman to win a Guggenheim and be able to go overseas, not wanting to fall into a particular camp, right? But being influenced by what other people were doing, but putting it into her own, into her own process. So if you remember from the string quartet, she makes a distinction between that first violin and then the other three instruments, right? So it's a very contrapuntal piece in terms of texture, right? It's not homophonic. These instruments are not considered support, right? They're interacting throughout. And she uses this idea of a tone row, but instead of 12 notes, she uses a 10-note series, right? And that's what you see from those other three instruments, second violin, viola, and cello. And then she rotates through that series, right? So it starts on a D, and she goes through all 10 pitches, and when she starts the second iteration of it, she starts on the second pitch, right? So it starts on the E there. It starts on an F here. It starts in an E flat here. It rotates through those pitches. So she's in a rotational form. It shows up in other places in sort of different iterations, right? In terms of that compositional process.
But that's what you want.
Right, because this is her ultra. Okay? This is why she's ultra at this point. Yeah.
So just like she's experimenting with like series and rows and stuff.
Series and rows, but then also the genre of the string quartet, right? Because the way she's working this is the first violin has one pitch, then it has two, then it has three, then it has four, then it has five, and then that starts off with the 10 pitches, and then as you go through, the bottom three have fewer pitches, and the first violin gets more and more. You get to the center, there's a longer pitch, and then she goes backwards, and it's a palindrome, right? So that's a ton of layers. That's a ton of stuff that we see kind of individually, like we saw the palindrome in Bartok, right? But we see the tone rows in Schoenberg. She's combining both of those, and then using the string quartet in a unique contract.
I confused her with the happening.
Oh, with John Cage? Okay, we'll make sure we got that clear. Adding more. And if you remember, the other thing that happens too is the first violin starts off really loud, with those being very soft at opposite ends, and that crosses too, right? So as the first violin gets more notes, it gets softer and softer. As they get fewer and fewer, they get louder and louder, right?
Could you call these, or could you also call it sound blocking?
Okay. Yeah. Is that a term you use to describe other pieces? Sound blocking?
Because even looking at it visually, and some in the Persichetti as well, where it goes from mostly in theory, we talk about Stravinsky, all this stuff, and then like nothing. Or it's a different group of instruments doing something else, but you can see that it's this group, and then something else.
Mm-hmm. I would avoid using that term for this, right? Because I would rather you think in terms of a unique way of approaching counterpoint, right? In terms of the way that these two are interacting. Good question.
I asked because like even with the dynamic markings, it doesn't sound like a sound blocking, more just background noise to like the first violin.
Right, but then you have to listen to the whole thing, right? Because then you see how that changes, right? And how they switch roles, right? How they come in the middle and then they alter. Yeah, Lee.
For some weird reason, I'm thinking Ruth and John Cage, they kind of are they like tuned out? Nothing?
No. Because this piece is 1931, and after that, after she sort of goes through this heyday of ultramodernism, right? She marries her teacher, Charles Seeger, and starts having children, and her music becomes very folkish, right? So you see her playing the dulcimer there, and she starts doing sort of a modernist take on folk songs, children's songs, that kind of thing. So her compositional career takes a really interesting turn after she gets married. She becomes much more politically active.
We're focused on her today. But we're focused on her.
We are. She has to pick and choose. She has a much more complex career in life, as they all do. But, you know, we got a semester.
Wasn't she the one who had her own studio? Who, taught?
Florence. Well, and Florence Price, right, the African American pianist we talked about, she had her own piano studio and incorporated spirituals into her teaching pieces. Remember Florence Price?
Because you had a list of composers who were working under Ruth.
No, that was Nadia Boulanger.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. Hey, that is why it's a good thing to do reviews, right? No, you're not doomed. Shut up. You gotta stop with that negative stuff. So then let's go to what you're thinking of, because that was the Copland slide. So I'm skipping to Copland, right? Because, yeah. Okay. Let's talk fast. Aaron Copland, right? Yeah? He studied composition in Yale and in Paris, experimented with a variety of styles, including jazz, but he wanted music to be more public. It was him, Lee, that studied with Nadia Boulanger, and this is the list that you're thinking of. Yeah? So Nadia Boulanger was Aaron Copland's teacher and Leonard Bernstein's teacher, right? Doesn't have anything to do with Ruth Crawford. Okay? So you need to separate those two in your mind somehow. Okay? Study one in the morning and one in the evening.
I don't know how that.
Well, let's purge it. Let's get it out of there. Put it in a bubble and blow it away. Okay? Yeah. So he incorporated jazz into, yeah. So it's during the 30s and 40s that we're focusing on his music, right? Where he was writing music for ballet scores and Martha Graham is an important name to associate with him, right? And film scores and incidental music, which is where Quiet City came from. Okay. Do I have to? No, I got 1 minute left. I'm going. Bernstein, we talked about that. Him incorporating popular music styles and that blurred line between opera and musicals. West Side Story and Trouble in Tahiti, the same decade, very similar musical styles. And then, if I have a band piece, you know what you need to say about concert band and wind ensembles, that we're seeing a professionalization of those outside of the military. These things add to that professionalization. The American Bandmasters, the College Band Directors National Association, conductors like Frederick Fennell, collegiate and professional wind ensembles, and then Persichetti writing a symphony, which is a genre associated with a really important, sort of hierarchical genre in classical music. Making it a symphony, making it 4 movements, using sonata form, and writing 9 of them like Beethoven. How was that? Am I done? 45 seconds. Okay, I'm going to stop.